We all started out this year with different thoughts and understandings about disability, what it is, who it affects, and how it relates to us personally. Throughout first semester, we all had our own experiences in Pathologies to Power and Beyond that opened our eyes to an entirely new way of seeing disability. It's not just about a person's condition, it's about the experience that we create as a society in our physical and social environment. We found that our education at Brown had done a fantastic job of teaching us about the medical realities of having a disability, but not about the social constructs that can drastically transform that experience. Because Brown had no other courses on this social model approach, we made our own class to explore the different ways that disability could be constructed around the world, and this is what we learned.
No universal definition for disability exists. While the United Nations defines it in this way, there are many different ways that people view and interpret the term disability. The way that we have chosen to view disability is through the World Health Organization's International Classification of Functioning, Disability, and Health Framework, or the ICF framework. This biopsychosocial model combines two prominent views on disability, showing that disability is constructed by both physiological and social aspects. It looks at the ability of an individual to participate in an activity based on biological impairment, social attitudes, resources, and other environmental barriers.
Before we dive into talking further about disability, I quickly want to cover the basics of disability language. Disability language, many times called people-first language, is important because it provides a guideline to language that does not define someone by their disability, but by who they are. For example, instead of calling someone a disabled person, it is more considered to call someone a person with a disability. Right now, an interesting campaign is going on throughout the internet to combat the use of the word retarded. Like the campaign shown, all disability language works to remain respectful of differences and inclusive.
Over 10% of the global population has a disability. That's over 650 million people, or more than double the entire population of the US. People with disabilities represent the largest minority globally. Their experiences differ based on location, culture, socioeconomic status, education, and more. The definition of disability shifts across cultures as well.
80% of the world's population of people living with a disability resides in developing countries. In some of these countries, as many as 20% of the population is living with a disability, and once friends and family are included in this estimation, as much as 50% of the population is adversely affected by the disability. Poverty affects education, access to medical care, and ability to provide physical accessibility.
Last summer, I worked in Zimbabwe with an organization called Sport for Socialization. This organization uses adapted physical activities with children living with disability. I cannot possibly begin to tell you everything that I saw and experienced while I was in Zimbabwe, but I can try to explain the immense effect that poverty has had on intensifying the experience of living with a disability. The average family of each child in the program lives on about $50 to $100 per month. Most of these children are not in school because they cannot afford it, and basically all of these children have no access to medical treatment and assistive technologies that they need. But that is why this program and others like it are so important. They bridge the gap between the immense need and the incredible poverty and lack of resources that exist in these countries, and thus allow these otherwise underserved people to have access to medical services, income-generating projects, and education.
One of the most significant factors in the correlation between disability and poverty is the lack of educational opportunities for children with disabilities. Organizations like Sport for Socialization have worked to change attitudes from children with disabilities are not capable of learning to children with disabilities deserve to learn.
In fact, we've seen that disability is a recurring theme in education around the world. Schools tend to emphasize control of what they see as unruly bodies and organize lessons and routines around limiting behaviors considered different or abnormal. In fact, while disability has been treated as a secondary problem to be dealt with by the education system, it's really the framework through which other inequalities and oppression arise in schools. Segregation is supposed to be unconstitutional in the United States, but segregation based on ability, often used as a guise for racism, continues to exist today.
Definitions of learning disability vary depending on cultural values. For instance, in American schools, a student who is independently motivated and finishes schoolwork ahead of time would probably be labeled as gifted, while in Japanese schools, the same student could be considered learning disabled due to a lack of what is called amai, a Japanese word that doesn't really translate well to English, but could be loosely defined as dependence on others.
So much of the failure to provide education comes from medicalization and stigma, as opposed to a belief in empowerment and learning. Cuba, for example, places a high emphasis on prevention and cures for all through an intensive communist healthcare system. Children, therefore, are readily identified at the Center for Orientation and Diagnosis for Disabilities, but special education teachers are left entirely underprepared. In Mexico, those with disabilities are widely institutionalized and medicated with no efforts at rehabilitation, education, or occupational training. Instead, they become lost in the system, abused, neglected, and prevented from entering the community at all.
We also looked at religion and disability. The three major religions of the world are Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism, and each one of these religions speak on disability in different aspects. For Christianity, disability is weakness, sin, and a challenge, but it can also be a way for God to reveal his work. The person with a disability becomes a symbol. In Islam, disability is not considered a burden placed on a person because they deserved it or because it was a punishment for something they did. For parents of a disabled child, there is a steadfast place in paradise if people completely accept their child. In Hinduism, where the central concept is karma, disability becomes an expression of the moral law of the universe. Suffering is the unfolding of a person's past or current life. This can lead to a spiritual journey guided by the person's dharma. So in a sense, disability is what it is, purposeful and never random. Over 4 billion people follow these three religions. That's about half of the world being shaped by these different views on disability.
Our class found the role of disability particularly interesting through the perspective of Voodooism in Haiti. In the Voodoo religion, disability is seen as a divine punishment after the person with the disability has made a transgression. This enhanced stigmatization of disability has led to many people with disabilities in Haiti choosing to be institutionalized rather than face the judgments of religious culture. Interestingly, after the major earthquakes in Haiti, much work has been done to change the culture of stigmatization, as health workers with amputations speak positively to community members about living life with a disability.
During our semester, a woman named Sandy came and spoke to us about disability in Uganda, and during this presentation, we heard the story of Peter. The story incorporates many of the obstacles we talked about over the semester, and the video that you are seeing is the discovery of Peter by Village to Village, a Ugandan-based NGO. Peter was born in a village in Uganda called Serere, and after finding out that he had a disability, his father abandoned him and his mother, claiming that she must have committed adultery because that doesn't run in his family. Disability in this area is often associated with a transgression on the part of the woman, or a punishment from God. With nowhere to turn, Peter's mother was forced to leave him locked alone at home, wrapped in mosquito nets to avoid malaria, while she worked to earn $2 a day to feed them. When Village to Village heard about this and found Peter, the situation was dire. Peter's mother had done everything she could, but the stigma and poverty she faced made it impossible to take care of her and her son adequately. He was undernourished, weak, and extremely pale because he was locked inside all day and hardly ever exposed to the sun. After working with this organization, Peter's condition and health have improved dramatically, but unfortunately the situation he faced was more the rule than the exception in the developing world. Peter's case shows how many factors, including poverty, education, and religion, are deeply intertwined and can have a profound effect on the quality of life of a person with a disability. Yet, when concerted efforts are made to change these factors, the turnaround can be dramatic.
After spending a semester analyzing and studying disability in different countries all over the world, we must now look at our own campus. Brown does its best to accommodate people with disabilities, but there is serious room for improvement. We have many accessible paths to get from place to place, but even if you get into the building that you want, most don't have elevators or ramp systems to access any other floor. We looked at disability in many countries and the problems that exist, but that does not mean we can ignore the problems that we have in the United States, the problems we have at Brown. We are one of the oldest universities in the country and are supposed to be a leader for other academic institutions. How best to lead them by example and make proper renovations to all of our buildings and increase our support services to make sure no potential student does not have the opportunity to attend this university, or any university for that matter, because of a disability.
So what does this mean for us? Our journey with this topic has shown us that both in the developed and developing world, even in the US and right here at Brown, too often people with disabilities are ignored. They're told either through words or actions that they're not good enough, not normal, not worthy, or not beautiful. Too often, people with disabilities are viewed as burdens, requiring extra resources or unnecessary accommodations. Too often, people with disabilities are eliminated altogether, or at the very least from society's view. But what if all of these reactions are wrong, not just because they're cruel, but because they completely disregard the vast power and spirit of humanity? All of these examples we've shared with you and that we've studied ourselves have shown us just how adaptable and amazing the human spirit can be. And in fact, when you take a step back and truly look at all the variation in the world, we hope that you'll see, as we have, the immense beauty in such variation. Beauty that should not only be recognized, but also celebrated. Thank you.